There is a silence in the Appalachian Mountains that does not behave like silence elsewhere. In most places, silence is simply the absence of sound. A pause between noises. A moment the world chooses not to speak. In the Appalachians, silence is active. It arrives. It settles over a ridge or a hollow or a stretch of trail the way fog settles. With weight, with intention, with the quiet certainty of something that was already there before you noticed it. The people who live along these mountains understand this. Not as folklore. Not as superstition. As geography. They know that certain trails change after dark. Not in ways that can be measured on a map or corrected with a compass. But in the specific, disorienting way a familiar room changes when you wake in it at 3 in the morning and cannot, for a moment, remember where the door is. They know that the mountains do not forget. What follows are 7 accounts. 7 separate locations across the Appalachian Range. 7 people who went in during daylight and came out. Those who came out, changed in ways they have never been able to fully explain. Not because they saw something extraordinary. Because they experienced something that the ordinary could not contain. In October of 2019, a man named David Harlan set out to complete a day hike on a section of the Appalachian Trail near the border of Virginia and West Virginia. He was 43 years old, a surveyor by profession, a person who measured distance for a living. He had hiked this particular stretch 11 times over the course of 4 years. He knew its elevation changes, its creek crossings, its switchbacks. He could estimate his position on the trail to within a quarter mile based on the shape of the canopy overhead and the angle of the slope beneath his boots. The trail was 8.4 miles, end to end. He had logged this distance repeatedly. It was not an estimate. It was a measurement. On October 14, 2019, the trail was 9.6 miles. He noticed it at first as a sensation, the vague, peripheral awareness that the second creek crossing, the one that typically appeared 40 minutes into his hike, had not yet arrived. He checked his watch. 53 minutes. He was not moving slowly. His pace had not changed. He checked his GPS. It confirmed his position as being exactly where it should be, which placed the creek crossing approximately 200 meters ahead. It was not 200 meters ahead. He walked for another 22 minutes before he reached it. David did what a rational person does. He recalibrated. He assumed his GPS had drifted. He assumed he had misremembered the section. He continued walking. But the trail kept adding. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would alarm a casual hiker. In a way that would only register to a person who had committed the trail's geometry to memory. A stretch of level ground that lasted 40 seconds longer than it should. A descent that required 6 additional switchbacks. A clearing that appeared where no clearing had ever existed. Small, roughly circular, with the grass pressed flat in a pattern that suggested something large had recently rested there. He photographed the clearing. When he reviewed the image that evening, the clearing appeared in the frame exactly as he remembered it, except for one detail. At the far edge, partially obscured by underbrush, there appeared to be a structure. A low, angular shape, too regular to be natural, too degraded to be recent. He had not seen this structure while standing in the clearing. He had been standing in the clearing for over 4 minutes. David completed the hike in 6 hours and 41 minutes. His typical completion time was 4 hours and 15 minutes. His GPS recorded the hike as 8.4 miles. His pedometer, calibrated to his stride length, recorded 12.1 miles. He returned to the same trail section 2 weeks later. It was 8.4 miles. The clearing was not there. The additional switchbacks were not there. The creek crossings arrived exactly when they should. He has hiked that trail 7 times since. On 6 of those occasions the trail behaved normally. On one occasion, November 22, 2019, a Friday, it did not. He will not say what was different about that hike. He will only say that on that occasion the trail did not simply add distance. It added a direction he had never walked before. and something at the end of it was waiting for him to arrive. He did not complete the hike. He has not explained why. He has not returned. The second account comes from a woman who grew up in these mountains, who knew their patterns the way most people know the patterns of their own breathing. She learned on one specific evening that the mountains had patterns she had never been taught. Margaret Sutter was 71 years old and had lived in the same hollow in eastern Kentucky for her entire life. Her cabin had been built by her grandfather in 1943. She had been born in the back bedroom. She had buried her husband from the front porch. The hollow was not simply where she lived. It was the perimeter of her existence. She knew every sound the hollow produced. The specific creak of the third porch step. The way the wind channeled between the two ridges to the east and created a low, resonant hum on winter evenings. The particular quality of silence that preceded snow. On the evening of March 7, 2021, the cabin made a sound she had never heard before. She was sitting in the kitchen. It was approximately 8:40 in the evening. The wood stove was burning low. The only light came from a lamp on the counter and the blue glow of a weather radio she kept on the windowsill. The sound came from the back bedroom. Her grandfather's bedroom. The room she had not entered in 11 years. Not because it frightened her. Because there was no reason to enter it. It contained a bed, a dresser, and a window that faced the ridge. Nothing more. The sound was a knock. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, delivered from inside the room against the closed door. Margaret did not move. She did not call out. She sat in the kitchen and listened with the practiced stillness of a woman who had spent 7 decades learning when to be quiet. The knocks came again. Same rhythm. Same force. Same location on the door, low, approximately 2 feet from the ground, as if delivered by someone kneeling. Or by something that was not tall enough to reach higher. She waited 4 minutes. The knocks did not come again. What came instead was a voice. It was not a voice she recognized. It was not a voice that sounded like a person. It had the cadence of speech, the rise and fall, the pauses between syllables, but the tonal quality was wrong. It was dry, papery. As if the sound were being produced not by vocal cords but by something dragging across a surface. It said her name. Not Margaret. Her maiden name. The name she had not used since 1974. A name that appeared on no mail, no document, no public record currently in circulation. She did not respond. The voice said her name again. And then it said something else. A phrase. 4 words. She has repeated this phrase to exactly one person. Her niece, Ellen, who drove up from Lexington the following morning. Ellen has confirmed that the phrase exists. She has confirmed that Margaret spoke it clearly and without hesitation. She has declined to repeat it publicly. She has said only that the phrase should not have been known by anything in that room. Margaret did not open the door that night. She sat in the kitchen until dawn. When the sun rose, she opened the bedroom door. The room was exactly as it had been for 11 years. Bed, dresser, window. Undisturbed dust on every surface. No footprints. No marks on the door. No indication that anything had been inside. Except for one detail. The window, the one that faced the ridge, was open. Not broken. Not forced. Open. The latch, which Margaret had personally secured 11 years prior, was in the unlocked position. She closed the window. She locked it. She closed the bedroom door. That evening at 8:40, the knocks came again. She has not spoken publicly about what the voice said on the second night. She has said only that it was different, that it knew more, and that she has since installed a deadbolt on the bedroom door, not to keep something out but because she is not entirely certain the door was the way it was getting in. The third account involves 2 hikers who entered the woods together and emerged with 2 entirely different memories of what happened between mile markers 4 and 6. On August 3, 2022, 2 friends, Cole Burgess, age 29, and Ian Wetmore, age 31, began a 2-day hike along a stretch of the Appalachian Trail in western North Carolina. They had planned the route together. They carried identical maps. They walked side by side for the majority of the first day without incident. Between mile markers 4 and 6, the trail passes through a section of old-growth forest. The canopy is dense enough that midday light reaches the trail floor as a faint, greenish haze. The undergrowth is minimal. The ground is soft, layered with decades of undisturbed leaf litter. It is, by all accounts, one of the more unremarkable sections of the trail. Cole and Ian entered this section at approximately 1:15 in the afternoon. They emerged from it at approximately 3:40. They agree on these times. They agree on the weather: overcast, mild, no wind. They agree that they walked side by side the entire time and did not separate at any point. They do not agree on what happened. Cole's account is as follows: the section was uneventful. The trail was clear, the footing was soft, and the only notable detail was a smell, faint, sweet, botanical, that appeared at approximately the halfway point and persisted for roughly 10 minutes. He describes the section as quiet in a way that felt intentional, like a library. He heard no animals. He saw no other hikers. He experienced no discomfort. Ian's account is different. Ian describes the same section of trail as significantly colder than the surrounding forest. A temperature drop he estimates at 15 degrees, though he acknowledges this may be exaggerated in memory. He describes the canopy as lower, as if the trees had bent inward. He describes the leaf litter as disturbed in a pattern he initially interpreted as animal activity but later reconsidered. The disturbance, he says, formed a line. Not a path. A line. Straight, deliberate, extending from the left side of the trail into the forest at a perpendicular angle, as if something had been dragged. He describes hearing a sound. Full, rhythmic, consistent. A sound he compared to breathing, though he was careful to clarify that it was not breathing. It was mechanical in its regularity, too even, too sustained, too indifferent to their presence. It came from below the trail, from the ground itself. He did not mention this sound to Cole at the time. He assumed it was a water feature, a subterranean stream or a drainage pipe from a nearby road. There is no nearby road. There is no documented subterranean water feature in that section. The most significant divergence in their accounts concerns a structure. Ian describes, at approximately mile marker 5, a stone foundation visible approximately 30 meters off the trail to the left. Low walls, no roof, heavily overgrown but clearly man-made. He describes it as old, not decades old but centuries old, with a construction style he associated with early settlement patterns. Cole saw no structure. He was walking on Ian's left side. The structure, by Ian's description, would have been directly in Cole's line of sight. Ian photographed the structure. The photograph exists on his phone. It shows trees, undergrowth, and a section of ground that is slightly more level than the surrounding terrain. There is no structure visible in the photograph. Ian does not dispute this. He says the photograph is accurate. He also says the structure was there. He held both of these facts simultaneously and found that neither one canceled the other. They completed the hike. They have not discussed the discrepancy in detail since. Cole believes Ian experienced some form of altitude-related disorientation, though the elevation in that section does not exceed 3,200 feet. Ian believes that what he experienced was real, and that the trail showed him something it did not show Cole. He does not know why he was selected. He does not know what the selection means. He has not returned to that section. Cole has. Twice. He reports nothing unusual. The fourth account is the shortest. It is also the one that has proven the most difficult to explain. Rachel Underwood, age 36, a high school science teacher from Roanoke, Virginia, departed for a solo overnight camping trip on September 9, 2020. She parked at the trailhead at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She hiked 3 miles to a designated campsite. She set up her tent, ate dinner, and went to sleep at approximately 9:30 in the evening. She woke at dawn. She packed her gear, hiked back to the trailhead, and drove home. This is not unusual. What is unusual is the date. Rachel departed on September 9th. She returned to her car on September 11th. She had packed food for one night. She had consumed food for one night. Her phone's battery, which she had charged fully before departing and which she had used sparingly, showed a drain consistent with approximately 18 hours of standby time, one night. Her fitness tracker recorded one night of sleep. She experienced one night in the woods. The calendar disagrees. She did not notice the discrepancy immediately. She noticed it when she arrived at school on what she believed was Tuesday, September 10th, and found that it was Thursday, September 12th. She had missed an entire day of work. Her colleagues had attempted to contact her. Her phone showed no missed calls from the missing period, not because the calls were deleted, but because her phone during that time did not appear to have been reachable by any network. Her carrier confirmed a gap in connectivity lasting approximately 31 hours, beginning at 6:47 p.m. on September 9th and ending at 1:52 a.m. on September 11th. This gap is not consistent with being in a dead zone. Dead zones produce intermittent connectivity. Her phone registered no signal attempts during this period. It is as if the device for 31 hours was not in a location where cellular networks existed. She contacted the campsite's managing ranger station. She asked whether any unusual weather events, outages, or incidents had been recorded on the night of September 10th. The ranger she spoke with paused for several seconds before responding. He said there had been no incidents on September 10th. He then asked her without prompting whether she had camped at Site 14. She had. He did not explain why he asked. He suggested she consider choosing a different site in the future. He offered no further comment. Rachel has requested records from the ranger station regarding Site 14. Her requests have been acknowledged but not fulfilled. She was told the records are under administrative review, a designation she has been unable to find in any public land management protocol. She lost a day. The mountains took it. And no system she has consulted, digital, institutional, or personal, can tell her where it went. For accounts. For locations. For people who entered the Appalachian Mountains expecting to find what was already there, trails, trees, silence, stone, and encountered instead something that the maps had not prepared them for. The remaining three accounts are different. Not in kind. In degree. Nina Prescott, age 44, was an acoustic ecologist. Her work involved recording and cataloging the soundscapes of natural environments, identifying patterns, anomalies, and shifts in ambient noise that might indicate ecological change. She had recorded in forests across 3 continents. She understood sound the way a painter understands light. In June of 2021, she spent 4 days recording along a remote section of the Appalachian Trail in eastern Tennessee. Her equipment was professional grade. Dual omnidirectional microphones. A digital recorder capable of capturing frequencies below the threshold of human hearing. She was recording not for content but for data. On the 3rd evening at approximately 6:15 p.m., her equipment captured an anomaly. The recording shows a steady ambient baseline, wind, insect activity, distant bird calls, interrupted by a low-frequency tone. The tone is consistent, unwavering, and sits at approximately 18 Hz, just below the range of human hearing. It is not produced by any known geological, meteorological, or biological source in the region. Nina did not hear the tone in real time. She discovered it during playback the following morning. What she did experience in real time was its effect. At 6:15 p.m., she began to feel a pressure in her chest. Not pain. Pressure. The specific sensation she later described, of standing in a room where the air has become marginally too thick. She attributed this to elevation and fatigue. At 6:22 p.m., the pressure migrated to her inner ears. She experienced a faint, high-pitched whine that she initially interpreted as tinnitus. Her ears were healthy. She had been tested 3 months prior as part of a routine occupational screening. At 6:31 p.m., she began descending toward her campsite in the valley below. The pressure and the whine followed her. They did not diminish with elevation change. At 6:38 p.m., she stopped walking. She stopped because the forest had stopped. Every ambient sound, wind, insects, birds, the creak of branches, ceased simultaneously. Not gradually. Not in sequence. Simultaneously, as if a recording had been paused. She stood in that silence for approximately 90 seconds. During those 90 seconds, her recording equipment captured the 18 Hz tone increasing in amplitude by 40%. And then it captured something else. A second tone. This one at 23 Hz. Slightly higher, slightly less stable, oscillating in a pattern that her analysis software later flagged as quasi-periodic. A pattern that does not occur in nature. It occurs in machinery, in signal processing, in communication systems designed to carry encoded information. The two tones overlapped for 11 seconds. During those 11 seconds, Nina experienced a sensation she has described to colleagues but has never published. She felt observed. Not watched, observed. Watched implies eyes, implies a direction. Observed, she clarified, implies measurement. She felt as though something was determining her dimensions, her location, her composition. The tones ceased. The forest resumed. She descended to her campsite and did not sleep. She has analyzed the recording extensively. She has shared it with 3 colleagues in her field, each independently. All 3 confirmed the tones are present. All 3 confirmed the tones are not consistent with any known source. One colleague noted that the quasi-periodic pattern in the second tone bears a structural resemblance to a type of sonar used in deep ocean geological surveys. There is no ocean within 400 miles. Nina completed her project. She published her ecological findings. She did not include the anomalous tones in her report. When asked why, she said, "Because I don't have a framework for what they are. And I'm not certain I want one." The 6th account comes from a family, and it concerns a house that the Appalachian Mountains decided to reclaim. The Briggs family, Thomas, Sandra, and their 2 children ages 9 and 12, purchased a home on the outskirts of a small community in West Virginia in April of 2018. The house sat on a half-acre lot. The rear property line bordered national forest land. The distance from the back porch to the treeline was approximately 120 feet. Thomas measured this distance during the home inspection. It appeared in the surveyor's report. It was a fact. By August of 2018, the distance was 90 feet. Thomas noticed it the way a person notices a hairline crack in a wall, not with alarm but with the slow, accumulating awareness that something has shifted. The trees appeared closer. He assumed his perception had adjusted. He assumed the lot had always been this size and that his initial impression had been generous. He measured again. 90 feet. He consulted the surveyor's report. 120 feet. He called the surveyor. The surveyor returned, remeasured, and confirmed. The distance from the back porch to the treeline was 91 feet. The surveyor noted this discrepancy in his follow-up report but offered no explanation. Trees do not move. Property lines do not shift. The surveyor suggested that the original measurement may have been taken from a different reference point. Thomas accepted this explanation. He did not want another one. By December of 2018, the distance was 73 feet. This time he did not need a tape measure. The change was visible. The treeline had advanced nearly 50 feet from its original position in 8 months. Sandra noticed it independently. She said the yard felt smaller, as though the house were being slowly surrounded. Thomas contacted the county land office. He contacted the Forest Service. He contacted a geologist at the state university. Each entity confirmed that the property boundaries had not changed. Each entity confirmed that the forest boundary had not been altered, replanted, or adjusted. The trees at the leading edge of the treeline were not saplings. They were mature hardwoods. Oaks and hickories with trunk diameters suggesting ages of 60 to 80 years. Trees that were 60 years old now stood in a space that had been open ground 8 months earlier. By the spring of 2019, the distance was 51 feet. Sandra began to hear sounds at night. Not from the forest, from the ground beneath the house. A slow, deep, grinding vibration, felt more than heard, as if something vast were shifting beneath the foundation. Thomas could not hear it. The children could not hear it. Sandra heard it every night between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. A structural engineer inspected the foundation. It was sound. No cracks, no settling, no evidence of subsurface movement. In June of 2019, Thomas installed a camera facing the backyard. He reviewed the footage weekly. The treeline did not move in any recorded frame. It was always exactly where it had been the previous day. And yet, every 4 to 6 weeks, the measured distance decreased. The trees were not advancing. The distance was simply becoming less. The family sold the house in September of 2019. The listing described the property as having a backyard bordering scenic national forest. The distance from the back porch to the treeline at the time of sale was 34 feet. The new owners have not reported anything unusual. Thomas does not know whether this means the trees have stopped, or whether the new owners have simply not yet measured. He does not intend to ask. The final account is the most recent, and it is the only one in which the mountains did not simply observe, or reconfigure, or reclaim. It is the only one in which they spoke. On November 15, 2023, a search and rescue volunteer named Aaron Wakefield was called to assist in the recovery of a missing hiker in the mountains of southwestern Virginia. The hiker, a 26-year-old graduate student, had failed to check in at a designated waypoint and had not been heard from in 19 hours. Aaron had been a volunteer for 8 years. He had participated in over 40 searches. He understood the mountain's capacity for disorientation, injury, and exposure. He did not believe in the supernatural. He believed in hypothermia, dehydration, and poor navigation. The search team was divided into pairs and assigned grid sections. Aaron and his partner, a woman named Deborah Stiles, were assigned a section that included a narrow hollow approximately 2 miles east of the hiker's last known position. The hollow was steep-sided, densely wooded, and seldom visited. Local trail maps did not include it. It had no official name. They entered the hollow at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. Sunset was at 5:12. At 4:47, Aaron heard a voice. It came from below them, deeper in the hollow, where the mist had thickened to the point of reducing visibility to roughly 15 feet. The voice was calling for help. It was using the hiker's name. It was saying specifically, "I'm here. I'm down here. Please." Aaron radioed his team leader to report the contact. His team leader responded immediately. The hiker had been found. She had been located 12 minutes earlier by another team, 3 miles to the north, conscious and ambulatory, with a sprained ankle and moderate dehydration. The hiker was not in the hollow. Aaron told Deborah what the radio had confirmed. They stood at the edge of the mist and listened. The voice continued, "I'm here. I'm down here. Please." The same words, the same cadence, the same inflection. It did not change. It did not respond to their presence. It repeated with the precision of a recording being played on a loop. Except it was not a recording. The acoustics were wrong. A recording would have produced a fixed point of origin. This voice moved. It drifted slowly through the mist, east to west, at a pace that Aaron estimated at roughly 2 miles per hour. The pace of a person walking. Deborah wanted to descend. Aaron did not. He did not have a reason. He had a feeling, which he described later as the specific certainty that the voice wanted us to follow it, and that following it was the point. They did not descend. They stood at the rim of the hollow for 11 minutes. During that time, the voice repeated its phrase 14 times. Each repetition was identical. Identical words, identical spacing, identical breath patterns. On the 15th repetition, the voice changed. It stopped saying the hiker's name. It said Aaron's. "I'm here. I'm down here. Aaron. Please." Aaron had not spoken his name aloud since entering the hollow. Deborah had not spoken his name. His name was not on his visible gear. It was printed on an ID card inside a zipped pocket of his jacket. The voice said his name 3 more times. Each time, the inflection shifted slightly, not as if it were learning the name, but as if it were testing which pronunciation would produce a response. Which version of his name would make him step forward. He did not step forward. At 5:14 p.m., 2 minutes after sunset, the voice stopped. The mist began to thin. Within 10 minutes, the hollow was clear. There was nothing at the bottom. No person. No equipment. No tracks in the soft ground. Aaron filed his report. He noted the voice. He noted the name. His team leader read the report and asked him one question. Was it the right name? Or was it close to the right name? Aaron said it was exact. His team leader nodded and said, "That hollow does that sometimes. We don't assign it anymore." He offered no further explanation. He did not seem surprised. He seemed like a person confirming something he had hoped would not need to be confirmed again. Aaron has not volunteered for searches in that region since. Not because he is afraid. Because he is not certain that the voice has stopped saying his name. He is not certain it only speaks when someone is there to hear it. He suspects it is still in the hollow. Still walking. Still asking. And he does not know what happens to the people who answer. 7 accounts. 7 locations. 7 people who walked into the oldest mountains on this continent and discovered that the mountains were paying attention. Not watching. Watching implies curiosity. These mountains are not curious. They are patient. They do not chase. They do not threaten. They simply persist. Older than human memory, older than the languages we use to describe what we fear, older than fear itself. And within their hollows and ridgelines and abandoned trails, they hold things that do not appear on surveys, that do not register on instruments, that do not conform to the physical laws we have agreed to trust. The people in these accounts did not go looking for the extraordinary. They went hiking. They went camping. They went home. And the mountains showed them, briefly, selectively, without explanation, that the ordinary world they believed they inhabited had a margin, a border, a place where the rules grew thin. None of them crossed that border. Not fully. But each of them stood close enough to feel the temperature change, to hear the silence shift, to understand, in a way that no subsequent rationalization could entirely undo, that the Appalachian Mountains are not empty. They are occupied by something that was here before the trails, before the cabins, before the names, and it has no intention of leaving, because it was not the one that arrived. We were. If these stories kept you in the dark a little longer than you intended, consider subscribing. Haunt Tales releases new horror stories every week. Leave a comment below and tell me, which of these mountains would you never visit alone?